Andre Citroen's revolutionary step was the introduction of a technology practically unknown at the time: front-wheel drive. Up to this point, virtually all cars were pushed along by the rear wheels. Though front-wheel drive offered considerable advantages of traction and stability, the technical obstacles had kept all but a very few car makers from attempting it. And of these, only the American Cord Company made more than a few hundred front-drive cars. Even so, Cords like this L29 suffered serious reliability problems, their constant velocity joints failing prematurely due to inadequate lubrication. It was not until 1966 that the Oldsmobile Toronado became the first front-wheel drive car to achieve success in the American marketplace. But in 1933, at least a quarter century ahead of his time, Andre Citroen wanted a car of completely new design, with no components carried over from earlier vehicles. A costly move that earned the antipathy of his head of design, Maurice. A talented young engineer named Andre Lefebvre was instead recruited to head up the project. Lefebvre came to Citroen from Renault, having started out in aviation, a background that would come into play as the car developed. Adding to the project's sizable cost was the necessary demolition and rebuilding of the Quai de Javel factory in just 6 months. The new car was introduced in 1934, descriptively named the Traction Avant, or front drive. The entire development of the Traction 7A had taken just over a year.
When it came out, it combined a number of features, any one of which would have been enough to identify it. Front-wheel drive, of course, torsion bar suspension, 4 independent wheels, 4-wheel hydraulic brakes, an engine with removable linings and push-rod-operated valves, and no running board.
The Traction was the first road car to include a torsion bar suspension, under license from the German auto engineer Ferdinand Porsche. The power-assisted brakes were likewise advanced and likewise licensed from the Lockheed Aircraft Company. None of these features were absolutely new in a production automobile, but it was the first time that they'd been offered together in a single car. Like the Rosalie, the Traction used welded unibody construction, the strength of which Citroën promoted by once again pushing the car off a cliff, and this time driving it away. The styling of the Traction, offered in both sedan and convertible versions, certainly was a giant step forward. Front drive and the absence of a drive shaft permitted designer Flaminio Bertoni to set the Traction quite low to the ground. The aeronautic orientation of Project Chief Lefebvre was evident in the unprecedented attention given to the car's aerodynamics. The Traction's sleek lines and distinctively sloping radiator grille made it look as if it were moving, even when it was standing still. However, because of the Traction Avant's radically shortened development cycle, not everything about the car worked perfectly. The constant velocity joints suffered the same sort of reliability problems that had plagued the Cord. They were replaced by more primitive but dependable universal joints mounted back to back. Andre Citroën had originally planned to include a kind of automatic transmission in the Traction. When the automatic proved unreliable, it was scrapped and replaced by a manual transmission that was designed on a kitchen table in just 2 weeks.
He just seemed to be able to pick and choose of advanced features and then, amazingly, meld them into a package, because if his suspension had been wrong, if his transmission had been wrong, if his engine had been wrong, the car would have been wrong.
The Traction Avant was not wrong. Many in the press and public regarded it as sensational, an engineering masterpiece. This was the car on which Andre Citroën had bet his company, but it was a bet he was destined to lose. Andre Citroën had staked everything on the Traction Avant. When it was introduced in 1934, the Traction was the most technologically advanced production car in the world, Sadly, this wasn't enough to save the fortunes of Andre Citroen and his motor company. The expense of developing the traction and rebuilding the Quai de Javel factory, along with Andre Citroen's growing casino debts and the global economic crash of the 1930s, combined to push the company to the brink of bankruptcy. The French government asked Citroen's principal creditor, Michelin Tires, to take control of the company.